All right, folks, I think next week we probably should cancel. Should we discuss the holiday meetings first? So I'm thinking 24th, I mean 31st, we probably should cancel both. Would you all agree? And maybe resume on the 7th? All right, sounds like everybody agrees. So Mitch, I know you have access to the calendar. Maybe you could. I'm going to put in the meeting notes. We don't have meeting for those days, so people at least knows on the
Yep.
agenda.
I can update the calendar to reflect that.
Yeah, thank you. I'll update the agenda notes.
All right, and given that it's going to be such a long break, we need to make an extra effort to actually ensure we get through all of our agenda items. So what have we got here? Seven items. So let's see if we can try to give just shy of 10 minutes to each. Or, oh, that's even too much, isn't it? Bad at math. 8 minutes.
That sounds good. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So Mike, you're up first with WDS changes.
Yeah, let me try to be quick on this. So basically, in current multi-cluster ambient implementation, there is a bug where even when the service, for a particular service, we are not expected to send to a remote cluster, we still can through a waypoint. Right? If you have a waypoint that is global and it is shared by multiple services, some of those are global, some of those are local, and I'm being hand wavy about what global local means here, but like I think it's more or less intuitive for this particular issue. So it could happen if Ztonal cannot find a local waypoint that is healthy. It will send to a waypoint in a remote cluster or remote network, and that waypoint will send to a service backend not in the intended cluster, right? So that's an issue that arises from like differences in configuration between the service and the waypoint that the service uses. I put together a doc to propose a relatively small change to WDS to account for that. And like the idea of the proposal is if we let the tunnel know what is the original sort of scope of the service that we try to reach, then when it selects waypoint endpoints, it can account for that and filter the endpoints that don't match that service. Like, for example, if the service is local, we will only consider waypoint endpoints in the local cluster and ignore all the waypoint endpoints in remote clusters. So that's a relatively small change. There is one twist on top of that. A service is configured as global or local in each cluster individually. So there is a possibility there for differences in configuration, right? So when in one cluster the service is configured as local, and the same service in another cluster is configured as global. And if we want to handle that use case, like then just sending to the tunnel whether the cluster is local or global is not enough. We would have to tell the tunnel the locations where the particular service is global and can be reached, or like sending a list of clusters where we shouldn't send the request to. So that is a little bit more concerning. So two kind of questions here is, do we even want to consider scenarios where the service is not configured the same across different clusters? Like a scenario where the same service is like local in one cluster and global in another cluster. We had some similar discussion before, and the assumption was that, well, the service is supposed to be configured the same. And if we decide that we should consider those cases where the service is not uniformly configured, then is it a big concern if, like, specifically in those use cases, we will send a list of clusters or like a subset of clusters to the tunnel as part of WDS push? So those are kind of two questions, and that's been already 10 minutes. So if you can comment on the doc, that would be great, and we can move on to the next topic.
Any questions or comments on service scope? Ian mentions that namespace sameness is a documented requirement. Mike, I'm pretty sure that this is not we've decided early on that this is not a violation of namespace sameness, right? Effectively, it's an accommodation to those who have some services they're not ready to have, kind of global, while others they are. In sidecar mode, you accomplish this through a variety of relatively complicated configs, and we wanted kind of a central way to do that for ambient mode. So you can see the design for service scope back from the original multi-cluster service discovery design doc in like February of this year, as well as the API conversation. But all of those conversations assumed that we had consistent config across all clusters. And so now as we're moving towards beta, we're considering what the user experience is when it's not consistent across clusters.
Yeah, so I think that the biggest sort of problem with saying that namespace sameness is a requirement is that I don't think we all understand namespace sameness the same way. And I think it would help to clarify what explicitly is included in namespace sameness and what is not included there. Or at least clarify in this case whether service discovery is considered part of like namespace sameness property or not, right? So I think that's sort of the core of the issue here. But yeah, I think we can continue on Slack or in the comments of the doc, and we can move on to the next topic.
All right, Jacek, do you want to tell us about cross-network gateways? You know what? I am not seeing Jacek here. So let's go ahead and move on to the next thing. We're getting through these things fast. Look at us go. All right, Ricardo, you want to talk us through what you're waiting for on this pull request?
Yeah, sure. It was actually from the last week meeting. Was just asking for some more reviews, but from the last week to now, I got some already some traction between Keith, John, I guess some other maintainers as well. Daniel was also taking care of that. I would like also to ask that even before this PR, I think it's important if someone else can take a look into the proposal, because I'm not sure what else should be done to move from the review to approve it or not. The proposal is on the note to reviewers as well. That's all. Yeah.
Okay,
Oh yeah,
so
excellent. Yeah.
I'll grab the link here so that we have the right link right here in the design docs. And in the meantime, Mike, do you want to introduce the next topic? Mike, you're on mute.
Sorry. This one is also related to multi-cluster, but specifically to multi-network thing, and to metrics reporting for multi-network setup. So the story there is currently when we report like metrics, actually a lot of them different metrics, we provide there the sort of source workload and destination workload as like labels. And for that, we kind of rely on different discovery mechanisms to figure out what are the source workload and destination workload. And there are two mechanisms in Istio currently that do that. One of those is a metadata exchange protocol, which is what sidecars used to use, or like still use. And there is a newer option where you basically like look at dynamically push metadata that matches from IP address to the workload metadata, like WDS, but you push it to Zitonal or to Envoy filter for waypoints, and Zitonal already gets that information. And you discover it basically by looking up for a peer IP in that metadata. None of those options work when you cross network boundary through East-West gateway, because well, the east-west gateway IP address is not the address of the actual workload behind it, so you wouldn't find the workload by looking up this IP address. And Exchange protocol doesn't work because currently in Envoy there is a limitation that you can propagate sort of metadata in one direction, but not the other direction. So you kind of will have the client side metadata propagated, but you cannot propagate to the client the server side metadata about the workload. So I wanted to ask if anybody has like any ideas for like how to fix that to begin with. But aside from that, there is an idea that when we report metrics, and specifically for cross-network scenario, could we report the next hop? Like, for example, instead of reporting the actual destination workload from waypoint for L7 metrics, we report that the next hop is east-west gateway. And we say that this is east-west gateway from a particular cluster or from a particular network. So the metric will not show that it's the destination workload is completely unknown. It will show that it went to a different network, to a different cluster, but we wouldn't know from this metric on the source side which particular workload handled it. There is already sort of a precedent for that. Like, for example, Zitonal, when it reports a metrics, it reports the destination workload waypoint if the service configured with waypoint. And I was thinking it's like we can adopt the same approach for the metrics for the traffic that goes to another network. Any thoughts?
It's been a long time since I've looked at this. Is traditionally when Istio reports an L7 span, all of the origin and destination information is around workload, or do we have any fields that are around service? You're on mute again, Mike.
I will have to look at all the fields, but
It's both.
I don't have anything.
I believe we have both where we can. It's already somewhat murky with destination service and sidecar, for example, because it's not always easy to know what service the client was intending to hit if a path even spawned to multiple services. But I think we take a best guess in those cases. But if you can clarify, Mike, are you talking specifically about metrics or all telemetry?
At the moment, I'm talking specifically about metrics, and related question in the chat from Mike about like tracing. I didn't test myself, but basically I was told that when waypoints are involved, tracing doesn't really work, or like doesn't work as well as it should. So I will have to look at that as well. Possibly the answer, Mike, to your question that no.
I'll also add that for hop by hop or next hop telemetry, that's true for L4, but for L7 we don't have it. So if you look at the traffic graph with waypoints and Kali, it's kind of weird. Like the L4 goes through the waypoint, but the L7 doesn't.
So you're saying the waypoints are transparent at L7 but opaque at L4?
Yep.
Yes.
I think that's expected because that's also true of auth policy, right? Waypoints are transparent at L7 but opaque at L4. So that's not terribly surprising. I guess, Mike, the question about service was really thinking through, we kind of don't want workload information on both sides of the connection. We've done a great deal to try and limit the specific knowledge of a client about workloads in another server or in another cluster, and vice versa. But the information that we do have as global is service information. Every client knows about every service in every cluster. So if we have end-to-end service metrics, I might be comfortable with saying that like workload information is intentionally not available across clusters because of the nature of multi-cluster environments.
Well, the issue here is that it's available across clusters. It's not available only across networks, right? So, and that would be sort of inconsistent.
So in ambient, those are the same thing, right?
No, right? You can like, we don't really put a lot of effort into supporting single network multi-cluster, right? But you can consider just like, I'd imagine at some point we will, right? And there's nothing that prevents reporting workload information in single network multi-cluster, right? That information
Right.
is available.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, that's the whole reason for moving away from single network is that it requires global knowledge, right? Every client knows about every workload.
I think it definitely would be a concern with the dynamic metadata discovery over WDS, but for example, it's less of a concern with metadata exchange because you just put some headers on both sides into the like connect request response, and assuming you can like aggregate them together at some point, which we currently can't, but like that would address like the concern, and you wouldn't need to push a global metadata everywhere.
You mentioned that Envoy metadata discovery does not allow bidirectional discovery today.
Yeah.
Which component is it that needs that discovery support? Is it the east-west gateway that needs the bidirectional metadata discovery?
It's waypoint in this case. And the issue there is because waypoint terminates HBON, right? So you would have to extract from HBON request header some information, save it when you terminate the incoming HBON connection. And when you encapsulate outgoing HBON connection, you would have to extract from the response some headers to like with the metadata, whatever. And the problem is the first, like the client side will be like, and the server side information will be separated by internal listeners, 2 internal listeners actually. And while you can propagate filter state across the internal listeners in one direction, you cannot propagate it in the opposite direction.
So then this does not affect non-waypointed traffic that crosses network boundaries.
So this particular issue does not, but non-waypointed, like purely the tonal traffic could use metadata exchange protocol, but it's still not implemented at the moment. So in principle, we can leverage, like extract this information from the header for L4 metrics.
Okay. Well, and you've got one end-to-end HBON tunnel in that case, right? Rather than having to establish 2 consecutive tunnels.
Yes, yes. And what also helps is that we are kind of in control of the tunnel, so we can propagate information whatever way we want, which is less constraining than, for example, Envoy, where we're limited by what Envoy provides.
Okay, I've taken up way more than my fair share digging into this issue with you. Do other people have questions?
One last note: I started a conversation on Slack about that. So if you have any comments, feel free to like jump in there and share your thoughts. Right? We don't have to take all the time at this meeting.
I would love to have some sort of verification that we do in fact get service metadata on these flows rather than workload metadata. And given that, I would be comfortable calling that kind of like a future enhancement that we could add.
Okay, I will double check. My current understanding is that we are losing all of that, but we can definitely recover service metadata by other means. So
awesome.
It might be one way to look at it. Cool.
Thanks, Mike. Let's see, do we have Arndt or Zappa in the room? I see Arndt. Do you want to talk us through Spiffy? Where we're at on integration? Oh, Zappa's in the room too.
So I'm here. Is Michael here?
Yeah, he's here.
Okay, Michael, do you want to take this because like you have more insights into the Istio specifics?
Yeah, I think for those that don't know that we did put up a PR that integrated Spire into Z-Tunnel. I don't have the link in front of me. And I think one of the sharpest edges was that it was currently making use of the delegated identity API, which is not SPIFFE compliant yet. It's integrated only in Aspire. And there's an effort right now in the SPIFFE community to bring in broker API, which will, sorry, let me turn that off. Make a SPIFFE compliant API for delegated, identity. I think there are some concerns. I know that was one of the concerns, and maybe there are some architectural discussions that happen in the background that maybe we could vocalize as possible concerns, or what is preventing this from moving forward, specifically the PR. We are open to making changes here. However, I think the broker API that make it SPIFFE compliant is sometime in the future. Thank you, Jackie, for sharing the link.
Yeah, I think there's two discussions basically. One is whether the integration between the Istio ecosystem and the SPIFFE ecosystem is going to be an Istio API or a SPIFFE API. That is one decision you need to make. And then, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, there was also the sort of discussion whether C-tunnel is calling into the SPIFFE ecosystem, or if it's going to be C-tunnel getting it through XDS, and the node agent is calling into the SPIFFE ecosystem.
Yeah, those were some of the discussions, who was actually calling the API, respective delegated API. And it was like, was that node agent? Was that Z-tunnel? Was that someone else that we haven't envisioned? And then, should we leverage SDS? And, what are the, how does that look? I believe those were kind of the discussions that happened over the past couple of months.
Sorry, when you say node agent, you mean?
The CNI node agent.
Okay.
Istio CLI?
Yeah, and maybe the terminology here that I'm using is wrong. The one that is actually responsible for, running the ZDS server and communicating with Z-tunnel. I believe that's either node agent, CNI agent. The terminology to me is vague.
Yeah, thanks. By the way, do you know what's the estimation for the API? I think you mentioned the spell community is trying to merge upstream the delegation API to SPIFFE. Is there any estimation for that work?
So we are currently the work is kind of it halted a bit, but if the Istio community is saying we're going to integrate it, we will pick that up again, and we can get that done in maybe by February.
Okay, so basically, it's the fact that Istio would consume it would really help pushing that API to upstream.
Yeah,
got it.
And we don't want to create a standard for not having a consumer.
Yeah, makes sense. Louis,
kind of a chicken egg problem.
yeah, I think Louis has a hand. Louis, you are muted, by the way.
Boy, I'm sorry, I'm on my phone. Just to clarify on a few things, node agent is a kind of conceptual thing, because SDS is a protocol, right? An integration protocol. Like Istio CNI would never implement SDS or provide identity components. That's not its job. It would never do something like that. in the world of sidecars, right, it was hypothesized that somebody would run a daemon that implemented the SDS API and made itself available to the various pods for key provisioning. So I just want to be clear about that distinction between those things. The other thing I would say is, like, I don't really expect SDS to be the thing that we generally want to use going forward. Right? I think we would rather, generally speaking, deprecate that usage if possible. Obviously, that's not possible today, so we can't.
Do I understand you right that this kind of means that the Istio community would be okay to actually pick up a SPIFFE API as a client? Because that's also one of the decisions that kind of block us from moving forward, because there's no point in us defining an API if Istio defines its own worksheet tunnel, right?
So obviously, if it's a standard API, I think Istio would be fine with that. Right, as you said earlier, there's a distinction today between a Spire API and a SPIFFE API.
Like this would be all standard SPIFFE, right? Because we have a couple of vendors in the space, and so all of the vendors would implement that API from a server point of view, including Spire. Yeah, so we are also pushing to make this vendor neutral.
Yeah, I think that would be fine. I don't see any objection to that. I was just mostly pointing out that Istio CLI is not the place where that integration would occur.
Okay. I don't know what's the process here. Like maybe Lynn, do we need to talk to more people? Should like what? Yeah, how do we get now to at least some consent or decision, or I don't know what's the process in this forum?
Usually we would try to document the decision in the scope of a design doc. I know I've seen a design doc in this space from the two of you at some point in the past. Is that still up to date?
And it's only from the SPIFFE point of view. I'm not sure if we have one from the Istio point of view.
Gotcha. That is our usual way of tracking decisions like this. It's not exclusive, and we don't follow it. If we don't follow all of our own policies at this point to the full extent that they're documented online. But at a high level, I would think a one-pager doc explaining the options and documenting the decision would be sufficient, in my opinion. What does everybody else think? Keith, you've got your hand up.
I was actually going to ask a technical question, so I'll wait until the rest of the room answers on process first.
Yeah, I'm with Mitch on that. I think you might already have a design doc, but I think getting it updated with the API move to SPIFFE and how Istio can potentially consume that API way and lens would be really helpful for us to understand where this is headed.
Okay. Maybe Michael and we can. Yeah, I hope it's okay, Michael. We can work together to just provide a one-pager to just quickly describe the flow. And then we can bring it back to this forum maybe early next year. Okay.
That sounds reasonable.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, I just have one more question. Maybe you can just have the design doc will answer this. This is using the host PID flow, right? So zTunnel would have the host be able to get the PID of each pod. Is that correct?
PID of the workload container, yes.
Okay, thanks. I think it would be useful to talk about the security implications of that in the design doc, because that's definitely something I've got some questions about when it comes to security posture.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we actually did address that because I think at one point we were sharing the host PID namespace, which is 100% undesirable, and thus have already changed that approach. So now the new security posture is exactly the same as it was before.
Cool. Why is it the same as before? You're still guessing the PID of a ephemeral process, right?
We are not guessing.
Well, if PID is ephemeral, right? So you may make a non-guessing selection that changes by the time you actually use it, right?
Yeah, so we do verify that PID. So we actually go straight to the container runtime in this case, which is the sole truth, of who this PID is owned by.
It's the
And then we
sole source
verify
of
it
truth at
again.
one point, but yeah, then it's like a
Yeah,
racing
we-
condition, right?
Yeah, so we do double check. Like once we request a PID, we go back to the container runtime and say, are you still present? So unless someone compromised the container runtime in this case, it should remain accurate. The Linux kernel does offer a whole host of ways of ensuring that that PID is not recycled. PID FDS is one of them. However, that actually introduces a security boundary issue at that point. So we have to make some decisions there. Like if that PID exits, then the container is going to exit itself. So we verify pod UID and the container ID as well.
Any other questions or comments on Spiffy? Great. Michael, Art, thanks for driving this. Appreciate it. And hopefully we can get that doc moved through for you relatively quickly. I know you've been working on this a long time. All right, other Mike, or Mike number one. I don't know who this number one privilege is, but you spoke first today. So remote network lasering.
It's just a follow-up. I wanted to continue the discussion we had last week. Basically, a few things. We tested the synthetic EDS endpoint approach, as Louis suggested. I don't know, I think we didn't start a thread on Slack, but we will do that. And it works in principle. But another thing that John pointed out, that we might have a similar lasering problem in sidecar mode currently. And I did test it, and we have a very similar problem. It's not exactly the same. There's some differences in behavior, but there is definitely a lasering going on when you cross networking boundaries with in sidecar mode at the moment. Yeah, and one of the things to mention, right, if we go for the Envoy extension approach that we kind of briefly discussed last time, that would be, we could extend it to fix this problem for both sidecar mode and ambient mode, which would be nice.
Mike, does the existence of this problem in sidecar mode mean that you don't feel like it should be a blocking issue for the beta?
I think so. I still would like to work on this issue, but basically the current behavior of sidecar for most intents and purposes is the same. And I think there is an argument to be made that if we allow in sidecar to operate in this mode, why not ambient?
Well, I've heard of an Envoy maintainer who might be able to get those changes through.
You expect a bit too much from me, but yes, we will try to make those changes in the upstream Envoy, definitely. So that's still on the table.
Awesome.
Yeah, Mike, do you mind? You said you hadn't put some of the testing that you've done in the Slack thread. Do you mind just sharing some more details about what you saw with the different things?
Yes.
I'm particularly interested in the what would the observed effect of the synthetic endpoints?
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. You mean the synthetic endpoints? I will do that. Or like I will ask Gustavo to do that. It will take some time. He's out of the office, but we will update you regardless. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Mike Morris weighs in, no breaking API change required for the lasering fix if it doesn't land until after the beta. That's my understanding.
Breaking API changes, you mean that users will have to do something?
User facing, yeah. Is there any user facing impact?
Well, if we fix it, there will be user facing impact in the sense that we will stop lasering the same backend. And I imagine somebody might be upset about it.
But like a user wouldn't have to reconfigure anything. Is that correct?
Yes. Okay. Nobody will have to reconfigure anything. We will hide it behind a feature flag, obviously, so that it could be possible to disable it. But I think it's a good thing to avoid lasering in general. So I'd imagine most of the users will be happy.
And then in terms of cross-version compatibility, if we have a lasering version of Envoy and a non-lasering version of Envoy, those would still be able to communicate with one another?
Yes, there's nothing changes in terms of like communications. The only thing that changes is like what endpoints we select in the end. And that's basically it. So there's definitely user visible behavior change, right? But I think it's a good change, and I will be probably proven wrong once we get it out.
Every bug is a feature to someone.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, I feel like I might have accidentally deleted an item off the agenda for the next meeting as I was trying to shuffle our notes around. Did someone else have a next up agenda that I've erased?
I think it just got collapsed into the last one. But no, it's not much. It's just I created an issue for defining kind of what beta would look like for the inference extension. So this is kind of just a call for people to take a look at that. Gotten some feedback from folks more familiar with that work. So yeah, any feedback there would be great if you have any opinions. Yeah, I'm working on the conformance tests now. I have a draft PR, kind of a mess still, but the gist is there. And then adding docs was the main feedback. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so this is the Istio implementation for JIE reliant on something like LLMD, or is it acting as a controller for the resources itself directly, like without any other third-party dependencies?
That's a great question. Yeah, that would be a Keith question, I would say. But sorry, yeah, no,
I'm just asking. So, like, Bits was asking me some stuff last night about trying to figure out like CRD management for the inference extension, and I have a question on the agenda for the GAIE group tomorrow on their weekly meeting to try to sort out like the expectations for like should multiple implementations using those same CRDs be able to exist in a single cluster, or if like I want to know like is LLMD today like installing these CRDs by themselves, or is it expecting them to be installed separately as a prerequisite? So just like as we get beyond like a single implementation of inference extension in the ecosystem, that this stuff's getting really important to kind of figure out. And I just think that there hasn't been as much rigor in inference extension as there has been figuring out these problems in Gateway API.
Yeah, I guess, would we not solve it similarly to the, how our requirement for the, Gateway API CRDs?
That had been my expectation.
Or rather not solve, I guess.
So like that had been my expectation, is that there is a preference for projects relying on those CRDs to be present on the cluster and not installing them themselves. But I realized that that was just an assumption from living in Gateway API, and that is not actually explicit in inference extension docs, and I don't know what LLMD is doing today.
Yeah, I don't
The
know.
confusion is not really oriented towards Istio particularly. It's more about defining, I guess if you zoom out, we used to have Kubernetes core APIs and CRDs. And for Gateway API, we spun off this third class, which is kind of a core API, but kind of not.
Yep.
And we defined how versioning was going to work on that and cross-product compatibilities and things like that. Well, now we're defining something that is not quite a Gateway API core API, but it's also not exactly a Gateway API extension either.
It's not a project-specific extension. So, like, Envoy
Yeah.
Gateway has a bunch of their own policies. Quadrant introduces their own policies, and those are specific to the implementation. So it's fine for them to like install those CRDs along with their other own unique CRDs. Same with like Istio installs Istio CRDs, and just like for the inference extension, I don't think that we actually have formal guidance on how projects should expect them to exist or get installed into the cluster. So it's not an Istio problem necessarily, but an Istio implementation is motivating figuring that out in the inference extension project. And I'll report back after I figure out what's going on there tomorrow.
Yeah, thanks. Just add a comment to the issue, but I'm not sure that's like a beta block. Yeah, but at least just, comment back at least on Slack or something.
Cool. Yep. Will do.
So Jackie, for the beta, do you have any like featured changes that need to make their way in, or is this just declaring beta support? I guess I'm trying to reverse engineer what our deadline is for getting that done.
I mean, I think that's, I think Lior brought up some like 2 potential features. I mean, there are the conformance tests, but it's not like a feature, but Lior brought up 2 potential. So we're discussing those. So maybe yes, it depends on the scope of those, but ideally this would be targeted for 129. But if the scope of those features
right
extends beyond what we could reasonably accomplish in one for this release, then no.
Okay. Makes sense. Well, then I will take a note for TOC that we need to follow through on requests for that relatively quickly, given that the timeline, I think, is January 19th is our feature cutoff. Let me double check that on the calendar real quickly. Failing to find it anywhere on the calendar. Oh, January 12th. I was giving it too much time. So we'll need to keep a close eye on this to make sure that it stays on not that it stays on schedule, but that we're not blocking it from being on schedule as the TOC. Thank you for driving that to beta.
Yeah, at least for the current conversation, it seems like these are nice to haves, but not requirements. It's really just the conformance test right now.
Yeah, if we're not affected by feature freeze, our code freeze is not until January 29th. So that gives a lot more wiggle room.
Yep.
Well, that was all of the slated agenda. Is there anything else? Like why did we get done early? We had 7 topics. That was crazy. Any other last comments for 2025? All right. Well, friendly reminder that the hotels for KubeCon Amsterdam are up for grabs at the moment and probably won't be in a week or 2. Tend to sell out right around this time. Thanks everyone for joining and have a great holiday.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, y'all. Cheers.
Happy holidays.